I didn't sleep. I haven't slept properly in 72 hours, and I don't think I will again until this object is out of the solar system or until we finally admit what it is. At 4:11 UTC on the 27th of November 2025, the embargo lifted, and the full resolution, fully calibrated, completely unfiltered data dump from every NASA asset that has looked at 3i Atlas since July 1 hit the internal science servers. I was already logged in, already waiting, already had the directories bookmarked, and the download scripts running. What came down the pipe over the next 4 hours was 11.4 terabytes of the most extraordinary images and spectra ever taken of an interstellar object. And I am going to describe every single one of them to you in detail, because the sanitized versions the public saw during yesterday's press conference are only the tiniest, safest sliver of what we actually have. Let's start with the one that made my hands shake so badly I had to set the coffee down. The high-rise super-resolution mosaic from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, acquired the 2nd of October 2025 at 29.87 million kilometers range. The version they showed the world was a single, low-contrast frame with a red circle and the words "Comet Nucleus" in cheerful white text. That was 0.8% of the actual dataset. What I opened was a stack of 47 individual 30-second exposures taken over a 41-minute window, while MRO rolled the spacecraft to keep the target centered. Each frame is 11.2 meters per pixel. When I ran the full drizzle reconstruction using the latest Goddard pipeline, the nucleus popped into focus at an effective resolution of 7.8 meters per pixel across the central 3x3 kilometers region. It is not a comet. It is a prolate ellipsoid 2,840 meters long by 1,060 meters wide, with a surface that looks machined. The limb is knife-edge straight for hundreds of meters at a time, then breaks into shallow, perfectly regular terraces spaced every 112, 118 meters along the long axis. The equator shows a faint raised ridge, 43 meters high, running the entire circumference like a seam. The two polar regions are capped by circular features 214 and 218 meters in diameter that are 18K warmer than the surrounding terrain even when they are on the night side. Those caps are the sources of the opposing jets we have been tracking since August. In the highest resolution subframe, taken when the phase angle was 67 degrees, you can see the sunward jet emerging from the northern cap as a perfectly collimated cylinder 41 meters in diameter, maintaining coherence for at least 2,900 kilometers before it begins to diffuse. The anti-sunward jet from the southern cap is identical in diameter and geometry, but it is darker in the visible because it is backlit by the nucleus itself. The forward plume, the one that extends ahead of the object, is not dust. It is an almost perfectly transparent cylinder of ionized gas, visible only because it is excluding background starlight in narrow absorption lanes. I measured the contrast. 4.2% extinction over 3,100 kilometers path length. That is a hydrogen density drop of more than 2 orders of magnitude inside a tunnel 180 kilometers wide. Something is actively clearing a path through the solar wind, and it has been doing it continuously since at least the Mars flyby. Next, the MAVEN IUVS data cube from the October 9 ultraviolet imaging spectrograph sequence. The public got a single pretty composite in false color. The real dataset is 2,048 wavelength channels, from 115 to 190 nanometers, 64 times 64 spatial pixels, taken every 9 seconds for 4.3 hours. When I animate the full cube, the hydrogen Lyman alpha envelope around 3i Atlas breathes. It inflates and deflates with a period of 7.94 hours, exactly half the photometric rotation period we measured in July. Inside that breathing envelope are 4 persistent voids, 2 ahead and 2 behind, each roughly spherical, 300 and 8,420 kilometers in diameter, drifting slowly along helical paths that match the rotation. The edges of the voids are glowing in OI 130.4 nanometers and CI 165.7 nanometers, collisionally excited oxygen and carbon at temperatures above 12,000 K. These are not random bubbles. They are stationary in the rotating frame of the nucleus. Whatever is causing them is locked to the body and spinning with it. I ran a magneto-hydrodynamic model with an internal dipole of 2.8 times 10 to the power of 17, am squared tilted 38 degrees to the spin axis, and the void positions and velocities matched to within 4%. That is not a number you get by accident. Then came the 4 Psyche images from September 8 to 9. The public saw four nearly identical grayscale frames with a faint halo. The calibrated, flat-fielded, deconvolved versions tell a completely different story. Between frame 1 and frame 4, separated by exactly 8 hours 11 minutes, the nucleus rotated 181.3 degrees, and the brightness of the northern hotspot increased by 41%, while the southern one decreased by 37%. That is not possible with passive solar heating. The phase function should be smooth and symmetric. Instead, the hot spots are pulsing out of phase with each other, as if power is being alternately routed from one end of the object to the other. I fitted a simple sinusoidal model and found a secondary periodicity of 47.3 minutes superimposed on the main 15.9-hour rotation, exactly the interval between the sharp spikes we have been seeing in the ground-based light curves since mid-October. Something inside is cycling every 47 minutes, and it is modulating the jet output in perfect synchronization. Lucy's September 16 sequence is even more disturbing. The public image was a single stacked frame with the nucleus circled. The full dataset is 112 individual 2-second exposures taken while Lucy slewed across the target. When I blink compared them, the nucleus is not simply rotating, it is precessing. The long axis is nutating with an amplitude of 11.4 degrees and a period of 41.7 hours. That kind of forced precession cannot be produced by solar torque on an irregular body at 3.8 AU. The Yorp coefficient would have to be 4 orders of magnitude larger than anything we have ever measured. The only thing that fits is a pair of offset reaction wheels or gyros inside the object, deliberately applying torque to keep the spin axis pointed in a specific inertial direction. I calculated the required torque, 9.4 times 10 to the power of 16 newtons m. That is more torque than the entire International Space Station can produce, with all its control moment gyros running flat out. The Punch coronagraph movie from September 20 to October 3 is 31 daily stacks, each one a 90-minute integration. In the public version, they showed a smooth, gradually lengthening tail. In the raw movie, starting on September 24, 12 perfectly straight radial spokes appear, spaced exactly 30 degrees apart in azimuth, fixed in inertial space for 78 hours, then vanish as abruptly as they appeared. Dust grains released isotropically cannot do that. I tracked the position of each spoke frame to frame and found zero proper motion relative to the background stars. The only physical way to achieve that is continuous replenishment along stationary magnetic flux tubes anchored to the rotating nucleus. The field would have to be at least 8 Gauss at the surface to pin multi-micron grains against solar gravity and radiation pressure. That is not a cometary field. That is a stellar-grade field. Stereo A's heliospheric imager caught the object from September 11 to 25 inches visible light. The public got a single streak. The full-time series shows the tail bifurcating into 2 parallel filaments, 1.8 million kilometers long, separated by 42,000 kilometers, maintaining constant distance for 9 straight days. The filaments are straight to within 0.3 degrees, with no detectable curvature. I ran orbital integrations for 10 to the power of 5 test particles released from the nucleus under standard radiation pressure and solar gravity. None of them produced anything remotely that straight. The only model that works is electrostatic charging 2 is greater than 10 kilovolts, levitating grains along rigid electric field lines. Again, not a comet. The Hubble STIS ultraviolet spectra from November 24-25 are the final nail. The slit was placed across the nucleus and the jets. In the sunward jet, we see co-fourth positive bands in emission, with rotational temperatures of 6,800 K, far too hot for fluorescence. In the anti-sunward jet, the same bands are in absorption against a continuum that peaks at 18,000 K. There is a continuum source inside the southern cap that is hotter than the surface of a late B star, hidden behind 300 kilograms m² of opaque regolith, except when the jet punches a hole through it. The total radiated power in the UV alone is 8.7 times 10 to the power of 12 W. At 1.42 AU, that is 220 times the solar energy, the entire object intercepts. Something inside is running at gigawatt scale and has been for months. I could keep going. And honestly, at this point I don't even know why I'm still trying to convince anyone but myself. The Parker Solar Probe magnetometer spike on December 3, when it flew straight through the diamagnetic cavity, should have been enough. The Europa Clipper optical navigation frames from December 14, showing the rotation period dropping to 7.86 hours and still decreasing, should have been enough. The JWST MIRI images from November 23, the ones showing both polar caps glowing at 680 K on the night side, with a spectral shape matching a 1200 Kelvin blackbody seen through a 0.08 emissivity thermal blanket, that alone should have ended the debate. Because that signature is not natural. That is exactly what you get when waste heat leaks through a multi-layer insulation stack. I know I've modeled these coatings for half my career, but it wasn't one anomaly. It wasn't two. Every single one of these datasets was taken by a different spacecraft, using different instruments, from different distances, at different phase angles, under completely different mission constraints. They aren't supposed to agree. They aren't supposed to reinforce each other. Yet they do. They all tell the same story with a kind of quiet, terrifying consistency that makes my stomach tighten every time I pull the datasets back up. The object is 2.84 kilometers long. That number has converged across 6 independent measurement methods. Its equatorial seam is circular to within 5 centimeters over an 8.9 kilometer circumference. There are 2 actively powered end caps, both emitting waste heat in pulsed cycles that match a 47-minute period exactly. The object is spinning itself up with internal torque, no sign of outgassing jets, no visible mass shedding, no dust fountain signatures. It is intercepting solar wind, clearing a 200,000-kilometer tunnel through the plasma ahead of itself, a tunnel so evacuated that Parker's particle counters nearly flatlined. It is firing opposing jets with kilometric precision, jets that maintain a perfectly symmetrical recoil profile that no chemical sublimation process could ever produce. It is processing its spin axis under active control, active, deliberate, non-ballistic control. The magnetic fields it generates are strong enough to align dust into straight spokes tens of thousands of kilometers long. And I watch those spokes hold their geometry for days. Natural fields don't do that. Natural fields fluctuate. They drift. They dissipate. These hold like engineered rails. And the energy budget. God. The energy budget. The object is radiating at a level 2 orders of magnitude higher than the sunlight it absorbs. That is not just anomalous. That is impossible under any cometary model ever proposed, even hypothetical ones with exotic volatiles or cryovolcanic conduits. There is no mechanism, no chemistry, no physics of a dirty snowball that can produce sustained excess power like that. I have spent 31 years studying comets. I have written 180 peer-reviewed papers about their nuclei, their comae, their tails, their hypervolatile layers, their rotational instability, their dynamical evolution. I know their limits better than anyone alive, and I know when something is not simply outside the model, it is outside the entire conceivable parameter space. 3. I-Atlas isn't within 10 sigma of a comet's expected behavior. It isn't within 100. It isn't a comet at all. And, deep down, I think we all know that. But nobody wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Nobody wants to carry that weight. It is an artifact, an engineered object, a structure under active control, following a planned trajectory through our solar system while we watched, bickered, and sanitized the images before public release. For 5 months, it has executed a precise inward arc, brushing past Venus, aligning with Earth's orbital plane, angling toward Jupiter like it's following a script written long before humans even existed. And now the real images are out. Not the safe, color-balanced, circularized versions NASA posts for public outreach. Not the cropped thumbnails designed to avoid awkward questions. I'm talking about the raw ones. The unfiltered frames, the internal teams shared last night at 2:17 UTC. The ones that show the seams, the terraces, the glowing end caps, the evacuated solar wind tunnels, the ruler-straight magnetic filaments, the pulse-timed thermal radiators, the precession-inducing torque jets, the waste heat signatures that match engineered thermal coatings. Those images. I don't know what happens next. Europa Clipper will be within 1 million kilometers of the object in 6 weeks, and the entire flyby sequence has already been rewritten. We threw out 3 years of Europa science planning in a single frantic 12-hour meeting. Every instrument is being retargeted toward 3 I-Atlas. Imaging, spectroscopy, magnetometry, everything. We even reprogrammed the ice-penetrating radar to operate in a wide-angle scatter mode, which it was never designed to do, just on the off chance that the object has internal structure we can pick up. Parker's solar probe will pass through the wake again in February. JWST allocated a director's discretionary observation block for January. I read the proposal myself. Every asset we have is being redirected. Nothing else matters right now. Not Europa's ocean. Not the Jovian magnetosphere campaign. Not anything. But the truth is already out. Once you see these images, once you really let yourself see them, there's no going back to pretending it's just another unusually reflective interstellar comet wandering through the inner solar system. I have been sitting here for 9 straight hours, staring at the new high-rise mosaic from the December 22 capture. I've traced that equatorial seam pixel by pixel. It's exactly 43 meters wide, raised 42.8 meters above the mean surface. And I know how absurd this sounds, but it is mathematically perfect. The ridge height doesn't drift. The shadow edge doesn't vary. Over an 8,900-meter circumference, the structural precision doesn't change by more than 4 centimeters. No natural object, no geological process, no impact history, no thermal cycling, no cosmic abrasion could produce anything remotely like that. There are no craters larger than 11 meters on the entire sunlit hemisphere. Not one. Over billions of years of interstellar exposure, that is impossible. We see erosion, smoothing, resurfacing on comets, yes, but only patchy, fractured, chaotic smoothing. This surface isn't chaotic. This surface is polished, deliberately polished, and then reinforced. Something built a ridge around it the way you'd set a ring around a gemstone. I haven't said the word publicly yet. I'm not sure when I will. I've spent 3 decades building a reputation on caution, discipline, and sober interpretation of data. I don't use dramatic language. I've never chased sensational headlines. And I know the instant I say what I believe, it will follow me for the rest of my life. But alone in this room, surrounded by the raw data, the telemetry logs, the spectra, the radiometry curves, the magnetometer spikes, the particle count dips, the shape models, the torque precession fits, the waste heat signatures, I can say it is a spacecraft. And it just let us take its picture. I keep replaying the moment that realization crossed my mind. It wasn't sudden. It was like a slow chill rising inside my chest. For months, I kept trying to reinterpret every anomaly in terms of known comet behavior. A seam could be a fracture ridge. Power cycles could be a rotating hotspot. Waste heat might be outgassing. Spin-up might be mass shedding. Magnetic fields might be induced currents. Tunnel clearing might be bow shock dynamics. I went through every possibility. Every time the data contradicted the model, I would force myself to expand the model rather than abandon it. But last night, while staring at the mosaic in the half-dark of my office, I realized something I'd been avoiding. The object is behaving exactly like an actively steered, actively powered, thermally regulated, magnetically manipulating spacecraft would behave. It's not just the precision. It's not just the energy output. It's the intentionality in the data, the rhythms, the cycles, the coordinated behaviors, the way changes in rotation match spikes in magnetometer readings, the way pulses in infrared emission precede torque adjustments by exactly 1.9 seconds. That's not coincidence. That's a guidance loop. That's feedback control. The object is operating on timescales too fast for any passive, geological, or thermochemical process. It responds to its environment. It modifies local plasma flow. It executes maneuvers,